The Red Army, officially known as the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army, was the armed forces of the Soviet Union. It became one of the principal military powers during the Second World War in Europe and from summer 1945 in the Far East. Founded by the Bolsheviks from the revolutionary detachments in 1918, the Red Army implemented universal military service. Both men and women of certain professions were conscripted, making it one of the largest armies of its time. The Red Army was crucial in establishing and maintaining Soviet power throughout the former Russian Empire, including Ukraine. The army's composition was multinational. By 1941, Russians made up over 53% of the rank and file, while Ukrainians, comprising about 20%, represented the second largest ethnic group. However, the army's structure was Russified and reflected ethnic discrimination. Russians held over 64% of junior officer positions and nearly 82% of general ranks. The Stalin purges of 1937 to 1938 dealt devastating blows to the Red Army. Approximately 44,000 commanders were arrested, and almost the entire senior command was executed. A third of these repressions occurred in Ukrainian based units. Stalin's regime demanded absolute submission and rigid discipline, leaving no room for initiative or independent decision making. The Red Army became notorious for its human wave assault tactics, often referred to as meat grinder. In 1941, harsh disciplinary measures were introduced, including severe punishment for surrender or retreat, with blocking units and penal battalions established to enforce compliance. The Red Army showed a startling disregard for human life. During the defensive operations of 1941 to 1942, it suffered enormous casualties due to poor tactics and inadequate training. In the offensive operations of 1943 to 1945, Soviet command continued to employ mass assaults, often with little regard for casualties. While this approach ultimately helped defeat Nazi Germany, it came at the unjustified cost of millions of soldiers' lives. In almost 25 years leading up to the Second World War, the Soviet Union had been preparing for conflict. It demanded extraordinary economic efforts and human sacrifice. The Red Army's personnel nearly tripled from 1.9 million in September 1939 to 5.7 million by June 1941. However, when Germany and its allies invaded the USSR, they initially held numerical superiority. Despite the Red Army possessing 8 times as many tanks and nearly twice as many aircraft. By 1941, the Red Army in Ukraine was a formidable military force, but the Nazi offensive in August to October 1941 led to disaster, with approximately 1 million Red Army soldiers encircled near Uman, Kiev, and Melitopol. We discussed this in the previous module. Ukraine experienced 2 waves of fighting across its territory, resulting in severe destruction. Kharkiv changed hands 4 times, while Ternopil, Cherkasy, and Sevastopol were almost destroyed. In 1943, following the victories of the Allied powers at El Alamein and Stalingrad, the anti-Hitler coalition began liberating Nazi-occupied territories. From mid-1943 to late 1944, Ukraine again became the primary theater of operations on the Eastern Front, concentrating most of the Red Army's tank and mechanized units. In mid-1943, the Soviet command initiated the total mobilization of Ukraine's male population. Even boys aged 16 to 17 were conscripted with minimal training and often sent into battle unarmed and in civilian clothes. They got the nickname Black Cloaks or Black Infantry. Between February 1943 and October 1944, approximately 3.7 million people were mobilized from Ukraine. In total, nearly 7 million Ukrainian men were conscripted during the war, with over 3.3 million perishing. almost 1 in 2, compared to 1 in 20 in the British Army. Notably, Central Asia and Kazakhstan residents manned divisions that fought on Ukraine's territory. Many of them were killed in action in Ukraine. The Red Army included over 800,000 women, the largest number of the Second World War fighting forces. Many served as medics, communication specialists, and tank crew members on the front lines. A remarkable example is Yevdokia Zavali, the only female Marine platoon commander who volunteered at 16. She disguised herself as a man to serve with the 6th Airborne Brigade, maintaining this deception for 8 months. After capturing a German officer, she was transferred to reconnaissance and soon became a unit commander. 4 wounds and 2 concussions prevented her from continuing her military career after the war. During the 1944 to 1945 battles in Eastern Europe, ethnic Russians comprised only up to 40% of some units. For instance, the 60th Army of the First Ukrainian Front, which liberated Krakow and Auschwitz, comprised about 36% Russians and 32% Ukrainians. Still, modern Russia attempts to monopolize the victory narrative. For example, while it's commonly claimed that Russians liberated Berlin and Vienna, these cities were liberated by the multinational Soviet army. Ukrainian Alexa Berest led the group that raised the victory banner over the Reichstag. Yet his name remained unacknowledged until the USSR's collapse, as Soviet authorities promoted the narrative of Russian victory. Ukrainians also participated in ending the war in the Far East. Ukrainian General Kuzma Derevyanko signed Japan's surrender documents on behalf of the USSR. The Red Army's victory would have been impossible without Allied successes on other fronts and economic aid, particularly the U.S. Lend-Lease, which provided essential equipment and supplies. The Red Army's success was directly linked to Allied military efforts across the globe. Soviet authorities couldn't ignore Ukraine's crucial role in defeating Nazi Germany. During the 1943 battles in Ukraine, 4 fronts were renamed Ukrainian. Propaganda actively employed the Cossack history. They also established the Order of Bogdan Khmelnytsky, named after a Ukrainian hetman. During the war, the Soviet Union used the Red Army to unite most ethnic Ukrainian lands within Soviet Ukraine. Stalin strived to push the country's borders beyond the Carpathians, strengthening the Soviet Union's global position. After the war, the Ukrainian Soviet Republic became a member of the UN Security Council. This was another step in Stalin's handling of the Ukrainian question. Granting Ukraine formal status as an independent republic within the USSR provided an additional vote and influence in international affairs. When Ukraine regained independence in 1991, it possessed many essential elements of statehood, such as formal state attributes, international relations experience, qualified personnel, and international representation. These factors formed the foundation for independent Ukraine's successful development in the new global context. Soviet policies influenced Ukraine's subsequent state building, though Stalin acted purely in his interest. During the Second World War, the Red Army was transformed into an instrument of imperial policy. The Soviet Union continued this approach in Eastern Europe. It actively initiated and intervened in armed conflicts, including wars in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and other countries where it sought to strengthen its political influence. While the Red Army played a vital role in the Second World War events, including Ukraine's liberation from Nazi occupation and the fight against fascism, it's essential to understand the context of this struggle. It took place among complex political and social processes, including repression, violence, and the denial of rights and freedoms to many people, including Ukrainians. This topic requires careful reconsideration, accounting for all contexts and properly acknowledging the contributions of various nationalities to the shared victory.